Since we were kids, we've all been given the same advice. Never judge someone until you walked a mile in their shoes. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and forgive and forget. But easier said than done, right? The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines empathy as being both aware of and sensitive to the feelings, thoughts, and emotions of another person. Having this capacity for empathy is interwoven into our very nature, not just as humans, but as conscious beings within this world. Looking at something from another's point of view is often surprisingly difficult, especially when those in disagreement with us are very different from ourselves. Though, according to certain researchers who study consciousness, individuals may be more aware of our connection to others on a subconscious level than we'd ever imagined before. I'd always considered myself a compassionate and understanding individual, and having grown up in a family with a multitude of health problems, it was no surprise to anyone when I decided to become a doctor. After facing so much loss in my own life, I had thought that I'd already experienced everything there was to learn about hardship and feeling for those who suffered. I couldn't have been more wrong. From the first moment I set foot in Nicaragua to do medical relief, I never realized just how much we take for granted. As someone who'd considered themselves gracious and worldly, I was taken aback at just how much emotional growth lay ahead of me for the next 10 days of my life.
It was astonishing to see other young adults, who were so often dismissed as being selfish and closed-minded, sacrificing their time, energy, and health just to show a small group of strangers that they weren't alone in their fight. Watching infants being washed in stone tubs outside their one-room home, or playing in the dirt with their siblings, was enough to shock me into silence more than once. Sickness and pain was everywhere, and meeting elderly women who rode hours on horseback through the rainforest just to meet with us for aspirin slowly opened my eyes even more to the horrors of this world. Even the animals were in deplorable conditions, and I found myself and others skipping meals just to feed them, our appetites long forgotten after seeing stray upon stray who were nothing more than skin and bones. I had felt empathy for others before, but there, in the middle of the third world, it was like being hit with a bus. And after that, life was never quite the same.
So what do obviously subjective experiences, such as empathy or compassion, have to do with consciousness? Well, science, it seems, is finally catching up to spirituality, and researchers in the field have discovered that on a larger scale, mankind's potential for global connectivity in times of crisis could be more effective than you'd think. Dean Radin's work on collective attention illustrated that a large group focusing together on a single thought can have a statistically significant effect on the order of the environment, something that can be measured by examining random number generators. Random number generators have applications in gambling, statistical sampling, etc., and any other areas where producing an unpredictable result is desirable. Roger Nelson, and his paper on coherent consciousness and reduced randomness, examined the behavior of random number generators during one of the most widespread and emotionally devastating disasters of our lifetime, the attacks on the World Trade Center.
Nelson analyzed data from several different random number generators and found that 3 to 4 hours before the attacks on September 11th, there was an increase in order in these naturally random systems created by the machines. Occasional spikes in the order of these systems are not uncommon, according to Nelson and Radin. However, they don't last anywhere near as long as those exhibited during the days surrounding the attacks, a period of clearly heightened emotions not just within the state, but across the country. The strongest deviations from the norm were measured between 9:30 a.m. and noon, during what one could easily argue was the height of the chaos surrounding the attacks and the collapse of the towers being witnessed by people around the globe.
Folks, it just bears repeating here. This is a tremendous tragedy, yes, but we are still the most powerful nation on earth. We perhaps will one day find who is responsible, and appropriate steps will be taken. They have not struck at America. They have struck at some individual places in America, but this country will go on.
If there was one word to sum up the collective emotion that day, I would say that empathy would have to be high on that list. Much of the fear and anger that the nation experienced following September 11th was not for themselves, but for our country as a whole. The sorrow didn't belong to one man, but to many. Maybe this collective consciousness that had such an impact upon the random number generators that day could be explained by the overwhelming outpour of empathy being felt by hundreds of thousands across the U.S. So what does collective consciousness mean for the world when atrocities like this happen more frequently each year, such as the most recent bombing in Boston?
Just as after September 11th, the nation has come together once more to show that empathy is far from rare. First responders to the scene at the Boston Marathon were not only police and paramedics, but civilians who ran not away, but towards the flames to help complete strangers with little concern for their own safety. Despite the tragedy happening less than 2 weeks ago, already Google turns up over 39 million results when searching for a Boston relief fund. Perhaps our empathy and our capacity to connect to one another on such a large scale that it can affect the very order of the natural environment means that compassion can actually cause change.
So, for once, take the advice to heart. Practice what you preach, and act when you're given the chance. Whether it is through prayer to whatever God you worship, meditating with intent to send good out into this world, or just feeling in your very core that we're all in this together. Empathy, no matter how unlikely, does have a tangible effect upon this world, and is clearly worth fighting for.